Welcome back. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadowed bedroom of a frightened child, where the dividing line between nightmare and reality dissolves into something far more sinister than simple bad dreams. This is Five Nights at Freddy's 4, a game that sits at the very heart of the franchise's mysteries, wrapping its secrets in layers of misdirection, fear, and family tragedy. From the countdown to a birthday party that would end in horror, to the monstrous animatronics that stalk through darkness with teeth like daggers, from a crying child's final moments to experiments conducted in underground chambers. We'll trace every thread of this intricate chapter in Fazbear Entertainment's blood-stained history. Billed as the final chapter when it first emerged in 2015, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 promised closure, yet it opened more questions than it answered. Set in 1983, years before the events players thought they understood, this game revealed the bite that started everything, introduced us to a tormented child whose identity would spark debates lasting nearly a decade, and gave us our first real glimpse into the Afton family that sat at the center of every tragedy. The gameplay itself marked a departure from the security office formula, placing us instead in a child's bedroom armed with nothing but a flashlight against creatures that seemed pulled from the deepest wells of childhood terror. But beneath the jump scares and the countdown minigames lies something far more complex. This is a story about guilt and punishment, about a brother's cruel prank that went catastrophically wrong, about a father who watched through hidden cameras as his son suffered, about experiments designed to weaponize fear itself. It's about the moment when William Afton's partnership with Henry Emily still held, when Fredbear's family diner represented innocent dreams rather than the sight of coming nightmares. And it's about how one terrible instant, when spring-locked jaws closed on a child's skull, would ripple forward through decades of hauntings and murders. Whether you're discovering these details for the first time, revisiting familiar territory with fresh perspective, or simply letting the story wash over you as you drift towards sleep, this exploration will carry you through every shadowed corner of Five Nights at Freddy's 4. We'll walk through those final days before the party, stand witness to the bite itself, examine the nightmare creatures that hunt through darkness, and explore the theories and connections that link this game to the broader timeline. We'll discuss Michael Afton's guilt-racked dreams, William's surveillance and experiments, and the mysteries that remain locked away in a box we may never open. Before we begin, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if you enjoy this kind of deep exploration that unfolds slowly, letting each detail settle before moving to the next. Let me know in the comments what aspect of FNAF 4 fascinates you most, whether it's the identity debates, the nightmare designs, or those cryptic minigame messages. Now, let's step into that bedroom and face what waits in the darkness. The Afton family, a house of shadows. In the quiet suburban neighborhood where Five Nights at Freddy's 4's minigames unfold, there stands a house that looks ordinary enough from the outside. 2 stories, probably built sometime in the 70s, with a small yard and a television visible through the living room window. But within these walls lives a family whose dysfunction would eventually tear apart not just themselves, but the entire fabric of the Fazbear Entertainment empire. This is the Afton household, and understanding the dynamics between its members is crucial to grasping everything that happens in FNAF 4 and far beyond. At the head of this family sits William Afton, though we never see him directly in the FNAF 4 minigames themselves. His presence looms over everything, manifested through the Fredbear plush that follows his youngest son, and through the springlock suit performer we glimpse at the diner. William is co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment, alongside Henry Emily, the business mind to Henry's engineering genius. But by 1983, his interests have already begun to turn dark, while Henry creates animatronics to bring joy to children. William has started to see them as something else entirely, as vessels and tools for purposes that have nothing to do with entertainment. The house itself tells us much about the family's position. They live right near Fredbear's family diner, close enough that the child can walk there, suggesting William's deep involvement with the business. Inside, the home feels lived in, but not warm. There's a television that plays Fredbear and Friends, keeping the restaurant's characters present even in domestic space. There are locked doors and rooms the child cannot access. And most tellingly, there's a bedroom decorated in pink and flowers that sits completely empty. Furniture still in place, but devoid of any occupant. This empty room has sparked considerable debate. Many believe it could have belonged to Elizabeth Afton, William's daughter, which would suggest that by the time of FNAF 4's minigames, she may have already met her fate inside Circus Baby, though the timeline of her death remains uncertain. The oldest child in the household is Michael Afton, the teenager who wears a Foxy mask and leads his friends in tormenting his younger brother. Michael appears in several minigames as the tormentor, the older brother whose pranks escalate from simple scares to something far more dangerous. He's old enough to have friends who follow his lead, young enough to still lack the judgment to see where his cruelty is heading. In 1983, Michael is just a bully, a kid who doesn't understand the weight of what he's doing, but the guilt from what happens at that birthday party will haunt him for the rest of his life and drive many of his actions throughout the series. Then there's the youngest, the child we control in the minigames, commonly known as the crying child. His actual name has never been officially confirmed, though some interpret complex ciphers in the survival logbook to suggest Evan, while earlier fan communities used Chris. For our purposes, we'll refer to him as the crying child, as that's what the community has consistently called him. This boy is small, probably somewhere between 5 and 8 years old based on his sprite size and the nature of the birthday party being thrown for him. He wears a black shirt with grey stripes, blue shorts, and brown shoes, and his face is perpetually stained with tears. He's a deeply fearful child, terrified specifically of the animatronics his father helps create. And this fear isn't just random childhood anxiety, but stems from something he's witnessed, something traumatic enough to leave him crying constantly. The child's relationship with his plush toys reveals his isolation. In the first minigame, when he approaches his collection of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy plushies on the floor, the game text reads, "These are my friends," not "These are like my friends," or "I pretend these are my friends," but a simple statement that these inanimate objects are the closest thing he has to companionship. A child whose friends are toys is a child without real friends, and given Michael's behavior, we can assume the crying child doesn't have a warm relationship with his brother either. William's role as father in this family dynamic remains enigmatic but troubling. The Fredbear plush that accompanies the crying child throughout the minigames has been heavily debated within the community. One prominent theory suggests it contains a camera and speaker system, allowing William to monitor and communicate with his son, though other interpretations propose the plush might be possessed by a protective spirit. If the surveillance interpretation holds weight, it would mean William is watching his youngest child suffering, seeing his tears and fear, hearing him cry himself to sleep, and yet he does nothing to stop Michael's bullying or to address the child's terror of the animatronics. Instead, the plush offers cryptic comfort and warnings, telling the child to be careful, that he's being watched, that he's alone. This suggests William is running some kind of observation, treating his own son as a subject rather than a person to be protected. Based on what we later learn about William's underground facility and his experiments with fear from sister location and related materials, this cold, analytical distance would align with his character as it develops across the series. He's not comforting his child out of love, but possibly monitoring data, watching how fear affects a young mind, perhaps even deliberately cultivating that fear for his own purposes, though we can only infer his motivations from his actions rather than having direct confirmation of his thoughts. The phrase, "I will put you back together," that comes at the end, takes on darker implications if William sees his son not as a beloved child, but as a broken machine to be repaired or rebuilt. The absence of a mother figure in these minigames is conspicuous. There's no mention of Mrs. Afton, no sprite representing a maternal presence, no evidence that anyone in the household is trying to protect the crying child from his brother's torment. This absence could mean many things. Perhaps she's deceased, perhaps she's left the family, or perhaps William's control over the household is so absolute that her presence is simply erased from the child's perception. Whatever the case, the crying child faces his fears alone, except for the plush that may be his father's eye and voice, rather than genuine comfort. The family dynamics we see in FNAF 4 are profoundly dysfunctional. A father who watches but doesn't protect, an older brother who bullies without consequences, a younger child who cries constantly but receives no real help, and an empty room that suggests loss already carved into this family's history. These aren't people who love and support each other, but individuals trapped in roles that will lead inevitably to tragedy. Michael will become a killer through carelessness, the crying child will die afraid and alone, and William will use his children's suffering as raw material for his own dark purposes. Understanding this family structure is essential because FNAF 4 isn't really about animatronics at all. Despite the nightmare creatures that dominate the gameplay, it's about family, about how children suffer when those who should protect them instead watch from a distance, about how cruelty between siblings can turn fatal, about how a parent's coldness can be more terrifying than any monster. The Afton family in 1983 is already broken, already dysfunctional, already on a path that will see them scattered across the timeline in various forms of death and undeath, forever trapped by what happens during these final days before a birthday party. The house itself becomes almost a character in this story. Its locked doors and empty rooms, and watching plushie reflecting the emotional architecture of the family within. It's a place where a child should feel safe, but instead feels perpetually endangered, where bedrooms become prisons and living rooms become stages for torment, where even toys and decorations carry threatening implications. When we later learn through sister location that this house connects to underground chambers, that its very structure conceals secrets beneath suburban normalcy, it only confirms what the minigames already told us. This is a house built on hidden things, on surveillance and secrets, on a father's experiments and a family's dysfunction. The tragedy of the Afton family is that it could have been prevented at almost any point. William could have stopped watching and started protecting. Michael could have been disciplined for his cruelty before it escalated. The crying child could have been given real comfort and real help for his fears. But none of these interventions happened because this family was already compromised by William's nature, already twisted by whatever drove him to see his own children as tools or experiments rather than people deserving love and safety. By the time we reach the final minigame, when Michael and his friends carry the screaming child toward Fredbear's stage, the Afton family's fate is sealed. What happens next will scatter them across the years, Michael consumed by guilt, and eventually scooped and possessed. The crying child dead or dying or transformed into something else. Elizabeth already gone into Circus Baby's metal shell, and William himself descending deeper into the murders and experiments that will define him. The suburban house will stand empty or be repurposed, its rooms stripped of the family that once lived there, becoming just another forgotten location in Fazbear Entertainment's landscape of tragedy. The crying child's torment, days of fear, the minigames of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 unfold like a countdown to disaster, each one labeled with how many days remain until the party. 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, then the party itself. This structure creates mounting dread as we watch the crying child's situation worsen, as his brother's torments grow more frequent, as the inevitability of what's coming presses down on every scene. These aren't random snapshots of life, but carefully chosen moments that show us exactly how broken this child is and why. 5 days before the party, we find the crying child locked in his bedroom. He's banging on the door, the pixels showing his small sprite, reaching up to knock repeatedly, desperate to get out. From the other side comes laughter, Michael's voice finding amusement in his little brother's imprisonment. Eventually, the child gives up, walks to the center of the room, and collapses on the floor crying. This is our introduction to his daily reality, to the casual cruelty that defines his brother's treatment of him, to the helplessness that characterizes his existence. A child locked in his own bedroom, crying on the floor while his brother laughs, and no parent comes to stop it. The room itself tells us much about the child's state of mind. Plush toys of the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza characters sit on the floor, the friends he mentioned earlier. There's a small toy telephone on the ground that he can interact with, hearing fragments of conversation that might be real or might be his imagination. The room is decorated with child-appropriate items, posters and toys. But the locked door transforms it from a safe space into a prison. This early minigame establishes the pattern we'll see repeated, Michael using fear and isolation as tools to torment his brother, finding entertainment in suffering he causes. 4 days before the party, the scene shifts to inside the house proper. The crying child is walking through the living room when suddenly Michael jumps out from behind the television, wearing his Foxy mask. It's a classic jump scare, the kind of prank older siblings have played for generations. But for this particular child, it's devastating. He immediately drops to the ground crying, overcome by terror at the sudden appearance of the masked figure. Michael, visible in the next room, just watches or laughs, the prank accomplished. What should be a minor scare becomes traumatic, because the crying child's fear of the animatronics runs so deep that even a mask representing one triggers complete emotional collapse. This minigame shows us that Michael knows exactly what terrifies his brother and deliberately weaponizes that fear. He's not scaring him with generic pranks, but specifically targeting his phobia of the animatronics. The Foxy mask becomes a tool of psychological torment, transforming Michael into a living embodiment of his brother's nightmares. And crucially, Michael does this inside their own home, in spaces where the crying child should feel safe. There's no escape, no refuge from the constant threat of being scared. 3 days before the party, we find the crying child at Fredbear's family diner itself, hiding under a table crying. This is particularly significant because it shows his fear isn't limited to his home. It follows him everywhere, especially to the very place that should be fun. When we try to leave the building, we encounter an employee in a Springlock suit, likely Spring Bonnie or Fredbear based on the yellow color. The employee seems to want to help or engage with the child, but the crying child is too terrified of the animatronics to even walk past them. He becomes paralyzed by fear, eventually collapsing in tears again, unable to function in the presence of these mechanical performers. This scene is crucial for understanding just how severe the child's phobia is. He can't attend the restaurant his father co-founded without breaking down. He can't participate in the fun other children are having. The very sight of the suits, even with a human inside trying to help, triggers total fear response. This isn't just being scared. This is a clinical level phobia that completely impairs his ability to function in environments where animatronics are present. And yet, despite this obvious terror, a birthday party is being planned for him at this very location. 2 days before the party, another shift in scene. The crying child is again at or near the diner, but this time he manages to leave and walk home. Along the way, he can interact with other children in the neighborhood. Some are playing, some are talking about the party, some mention the animatronics. These interactions paint a picture of a community excited about Fredbears, of children who love the characters and shows, which makes the crying child's terror even more isolating. Everyone else thinks these animatronics are wonderful, except him. When he finally reaches home and enters his room, Michael jumps out from under the bed, another scare that sends him to the floor crying. The torment is relentless, predictable, and escalating. 1 day before the party, the situation reaches a new low. The crying child is locked in the parts and service room at Fredbear's, surrounded by animatronic parts and spare suits. He's begging to be let out, crying and pleading, while from outside we can hear laughter. This is no longer a simple prank, but deliberate psychological torture. Michael has locked his brother in a room full of the exact things he fears most, in darkness, alone, begging for release while people outside laugh at his suffering. This scene represents the peak of Michael's cruelty before the party itself, showing how far he's willing to go to terrify his brother. But there's something else in this minigame that many players have noticed. When locked in parts and service, if you look carefully at the animatronic parts, there appear to be what some interpret as tufts of hair sticking out from one of the suits. It's subtle, easy to dismiss as texture or visual artifact, but the implication it raises is disturbing. This has led some to theorize the crying child may have witnessed something, perhaps seeing evidence of what happens when things go wrong with the suits, or possibly even glimpsing the aftermath of something darker, even if he didn't understand what he was seeing. The phrase, "remember what you saw," that the Fredbear plush tells him takes on new meaning. He's not just afraid of the animatronics themselves, but of what he knows they contain. Throughout all these minigames, the Fredbear plush appears repeatedly, following the crying child, offering cryptic comfort and warnings. Tomorrow is another day, it tells him. You know what will happen if he catches you, it warns when Foxy appears. Most famously, it says, "You are broken. I will put you back together," in the final scene. These messages have sparked endless debate about who's speaking through the plush, William keeping tabs on his son or some other entity trying to help. But what's clear is that even this comfort is strange and unsettling, rather than truly reassuring. The messages the crying child receives are consistently isolating. He's always watching you, suggesting paranoia and lack of privacy. These are your friends, about inanimate toys, reinforcing his loneliness. Tomorrow is another day, offering empty hope when each day brings new torment. Even the comfort is tinged with something wrong, something that doesn't quite sound like a loving parent or friend, but more like an observer taking notes on a subject's deterioration. What makes these mini-games so effective at building dread is that we know exactly where they're leading. The game literally counts down for us. 5 days, 4, 3, 2, 1, party. We watch this child suffer, watch his fear grow, watch his brother's cruelty escalate, and we know that in the end there will be a bite. The inevitability hangs over every scene, transforming even the quieter moments into sources of tension. When the crying child is locked in his room or hiding under a table, we know it's building towards something worse. The other children in Michael's friend group deserve mention here as well. In various minigames, we see 3 other kids who wear masks of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, following Michael's lead in tormenting the crying child. These aren't just random bullies, but organized participants in prolonged psychological torment. They help corner the child. They help trap him in the parts and service room, and ultimately they help carry him toward Fredbear's jaws. Their presence shows this isn't just sibling conflict, but sustained group bullying, with Michael as the ringleader turning his brother's terror into entertainment for his friends. The question of why Michael does this has been debated extensively in the community. Is he just a thoughtless kid who doesn't understand consequences? Is he acting out his own trauma? Does he resent his brother for some reason? The game doesn't give us Michael's motivation, only his actions, but the sustained nature of the bullying suggests it's more than just typical sibling stuff. This is targeted, relentless, and specifically designed to exploit his brother's deepest fears. Whatever drives Michael, by the time we reach the party day, he's created a situation where his brother is completely traumatized. The crying child's tears throughout these scenes aren't just visual flavor, but the defining characteristic of his existence during these days. He cries when locked in his room, cries when scared by the mask, cries when he sees the animatronics, cries when trapped in parts and service. The crying is constant. It's his primary response to everything. And it signals a child who's completely overwhelmed and has no other way to express his terror and helplessness. These aren't momentary upsets, but sustained distress that never really ends. By the time we reach the final day, when Michael and his friends pick up the screaming, crying child and carry him toward the stage, we've seen 5 days of build-up showing us exactly how vulnerable and afraid this child is. We've seen him locked away, scared repeatedly, isolated from genuine comfort, surrounded by the very things that terrify him. We've seen a child who begs to be let out of rooms, who collapses crying on floors, who can't function around animatronics. And now we're about to see what happens when that child is forced into direct contact with an animatronic's jaws, when the one thing he fears most becomes real in the worst possible way. The minigames of FNAF 4 are masterful at creating sympathy for the crying child, while also building the inevitability of disaster. Each day strips away another layer of safety, brings him closer to the moment when his worst fears will be realized, shows us a child drowning in terror with no one throwing him a lifeline. The countdown doesn't just mark time, but tracks the escalation of cruelty and fear until there's nowhere left to go but the bite itself. Fredbear's Family Diner in 1983. The setting for most of FNAF 4's minigames is Fredbear's Family Diner. the original restaurant that started the entire Fazbear entertainment empire. By 1983, when these events unfold, the diner represents the early days of the partnership between William Afton and Henry Emily, a time before the franchise expanded into the chain of Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations, before the murders that would define the company, before everything went wrong. Understanding this location and its significance helps contextualize not just FNAF 4, but the entire timeline. Fredbear's Family Diner was a modest establishment compared to what would come later. From what we see in the minigames, it features a main dining area with tables where families eat, a stage where the animatronics perform, a parts and service room for maintaining the characters, and the usual restaurant infrastructure of kitchens and back rooms. The aesthetic is very much of its time, likely decorated with bright colors and simple furnishings, aiming for a family-friendly atmosphere that would attract parents and children alike. This is before the elaborate attractions and multiple animatronic bands. This is the proof of concept, the place where Henry and William first tried to merge entertainment robotics with the restaurant business. The stars of Fredbear's are two characters, Fredbear himself and Spring Bonnie. Fredbear is a golden bear with a purple top hat and bow tie, the friendly face mascot who would eventually inspire the later Freddy Fazbear character. Spring Bonnie is a golden rabbit, similarly dressed, serving as Fredbear's companion. These two characters represent Henry Emily's engineering achievement, the springlock suits that would become both the diner's main attraction and, eventually, the source of tragedy. Springlock technology is crucial to understanding FNAF 4 and the bite that occurs. These suits were designed with a dual purpose that seemed ingenious at the time, but carried horrifying risks. When the springlocks were wound tight, the suit would function as an animatronic, powered to move and perform on its own. But when a performer needed to wear the suit, the locks could be carefully released, compressing the animatronic components back to create space for a human body. The person would climb inside, and the suit would appear to function normally, allowing for more flexible performances than a purely mechanical animatronic could provide. However, the springlock mechanisms were dangerously sensitive. Moisture from breath, sweat, or even humidity in the air could cause the locks to loosen. Any sudden movement or impact could trigger them. And when spring locks failed, the compressed animatronic parts would snap back into place with lethal force, driving metal rods, gears, and framework into whoever was inside the suit. Training tapes would later warn employees about these dangers, but in 1983, the technology is still new enough that perhaps the full extent of the risks isn't widely understood. In the FNAF 4 minigames, we see the diner in operation. Children are present, excited about the animatronics. The restaurant is hosting birthday parties, including the one planned for the crying child. Employees wear the springlock suits to interact with guests more directly than automated animatronics could. Everything appears festive and successful, the business model working exactly as Henry and William envisioned. Families come for food and entertainment. Children love the characters, and the diner makes money. On the surface, it's the American dream of small business success, but beneath this cheerful exterior, several concerning elements lurk. There's a parts and service room where spare suits and animatronic components are stored, and this room is dark enough and isolated enough that a child can be locked inside as punishment or as a cruel prank. The suggestion that the crying child may have witnessed something involving the suits, possibly seeing hair or evidence of someone inside, hints that even this early, things may be happening at Fredbear's that shouldn't be. Whether William Afton has already begun his experiments or murders by 1983 remains debated, but the possibility that the crying child saw something terrible adds weight to his fears. The year 1983 is confirmed through multiple sources in the game itself. The television shows Fredbear and Friends with a copyright date of 1983 visible on screen. This dating is crucial because it establishes that the bite in FNAF 4 is not the bite of 87 referenced in the first game, but rather a separate incident, the bite of 83. This distinction was one of the major revelations FNAF 4 brought to the lore, showing that there were two significant bite incidents in Fazbear Entertainment's history, each with its own circumstances and victim. The partnership between Henry Emily and William Afton in 1983 still appears functional, though we can assume cracks are forming. Henry focuses on the engineering and entertainment aspects, creating animatronics that delight children through clever mechanics and programming. William handles the business side, but his interests extend beyond simple profit into darker territories. The difference in their characters, one creative and caring, the other analytical and cold, will eventually doom their partnership. But in 1983, they're still presenting a united front, still building something together. The diner's location near the Afton household is significant. It's close enough that the crying child can walk there, close enough that William can easily travel between home and work, close enough that the business is thoroughly integrated into the family's daily life. This proximity means the Afton children grow up surrounded by animatronics and entertainment robots, which for Elizabeth and potentially Michael becomes fascination, but for the crying child becomes a source of constant fear. Community reception of Fredbears appears generally positive in the minigames. Other children we meet are excited about the restaurant, talk about the characters enthusiastically, look forward to parties there. This suggests Fredbears has successfully created the kind of magical experience for kids that would later be attempted at Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations. The animatronics are novel and exciting. The shows are entertaining. The food is presumably decent, and families keep coming back. Only the crying child seems to see something wrong with the place, to sense danger where others see fun. The stage where Fredbear and Spring Bonnie perform becomes the site of the bite, making it central to FNAF 4's tragedy. During normal operation, children would gather around this stage to watch the animatronics sing and perform. But the design allows for close interaction, close enough that a child's head could fit into an animatronic's mouth. Whether this was intentional for some bite routine in the performance or simply a consequence of the realistic design isn't clear, but the accessibility of the animatronics' mouths creates the opportunity for the prank that Michael and his friends enact. The parts and service room deserves special attention as the place where the crying child experiences one of his worst moments of torment. This back room, hidden from customers, contains spare parts, backup suits, and maintenance equipment. It's dark, it's full of animatronic components in various states of assembly, and it's exactly the kind of environment that would terrify a child already afraid of these characters. Being locked in here isn't just being locked in a closet, but being trapped in a room full of nightmares, surrounded by the mechanical skeletons and empty suits that his fears populate with terrible possibilities. The employees we glimpse in the minigames appear in spring-lock suits, presumably entertaining guests. These workers are taking on significant risk, literally climbing inside machines that could kill them if something goes wrong. But they likely don't fully understand the danger or have been assured the suits are safe when proper procedures are followed. The casual way employees wear these suits suggests the multiple spring-lock failures. Phone guy references in FNAF 3 haven't happened yet, or if they have, news hasn't reached Fredbear's. The technology is still seen as innovative rather than deadly. Fredbear's family diner in 1983 represents a moment of possibility in the FNAF timeline, a point before everything went irreversibly wrong. Yes, the crying child will die here or shortly after, but the diner itself is still just a restaurant, still focused on entertainment rather than murder or experiments. Henry and William's partnership hasn't completely soured. The animatronics haven't been possessed by murdered children. The franchise hasn't expanded into the empire that will eventually collapse under the weight of its own tragedies. This is the beginning, the seed from which everything else grows. The fate of Fredbear's after the bite is closure, at least temporarily. A child dying at a birthday party, crushed by an animatronic's jaws in front of witnesses, is the kind of incident that shuts down a business immediately. The liability, the public outcry, the investigation, all of it would make continuing operations impossible. The Springlock suites would be shelved as too dangerous for regular use. The location would be abandoned or repurposed. Fredbear and Spring Bonnie would be retired, at least from this venue, eventually ending up in storage or being moved to other locations. But the diner's influence extends far beyond its operational years. The trauma inflicted here, on the crying child, on Michael, on the families present, ripples forward through time. The bite leads to stricter safety regulations that will affect all future Fazbear locations. The Springlock technology's flaws become undeniable, leading to the failures Phone Guy mentions, and eventually to William Afton's own fate when he tries to hide inside Spring Bonnie. The characters of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie become templates for later designs while also carrying the association with this tragedy. For William Afton specifically, what happens at Fredbear's in 1983 may be formative in ways we can only speculate about. Does watching his son die or be severely injured in an animatronic's jaws affect his view of these machines? Does it inspire his later experiments with fear and his use of animatronics as tools for murder? Or is he already on that path, and his son's fate is simply another data point to him, another observation about how easily these machines can destroy human life? The game doesn't tell us William's internal response, but we know that after 1983, his descent into darkness accelerates. Fredbear's family diner, then, is both a real location in the FNAF universe and a symbol of lost innocence. It's where dreams of family entertainment existed before being corrupted by murder and possession. It's where Henry Emily's creative genius briefly flourished before being tainted by his partner's darkness. It's where children laughed and played before those same spaces became sites of tragedy. And it's where the Afton family's dysfunction reached its inevitable catastrophic conclusion, with a birthday party turning into a funeral and a business partnership beginning its long collapse. The bite of 83, a tragedy unfolds. The day of the party arrives, and with it comes the moment that defines Five Nights at Freddy's 4 and casts a long shadow across the entire franchise. Everything the minigames have been building toward, all the fear and bullying and warning signs, culminates in a few terrible seconds when a prank goes catastrophically wrong and a child's skull is crushed in an animatronic's jaws. This is the bite of 83, distinct from the later bite of 87, and understanding exactly what happens and why requires examining the event from multiple angles. The final minigame begins differently from the others. Instead of the usual countdown text, we see the crying child at home, presumably getting ready for his party. Michael and his friends are already in their masks: Foxy, Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica. transforming themselves into walking embodiments of the characters their brother fears. They approach the crying child, and there's a moment where he could potentially run or hide, but he's surrounded. 4 masked teenagers versus 1 small, terrified child. The power dynamic is completely lopsided from the start. What happens next has become one of the most debated sequences in FNAF lore. Not because what occurs is unclear, but because the motivation and full implications remain mysterious. Michael and his friends pick up the crying child. He's struggling, crying, begging, but they're much larger and stronger. They carry him out of the house, down the street, toward Fredbear's family diner. Other children and possibly adults are around. This is a public birthday party, but no one intervenes to stop what's clearly a child in distress being forcibly carried somewhere against his will. The group reaches the diner and pushes through to where Fredbear stands on stage, presumably mid-performance or between shows. The animatronic's mouth is open, either as part of a programmed routine or simply in a neutral resting position. Michael and his friends lift the crying child higher, ignoring his screams and tears. They're chanting something, likely encouraging him to give Fredbear a kiss, turning what they think is a harmless prank into an extended moment of terror for their victim. Then they shove the child's head directly into Fredbear's open mouth. What happens next occurs in seconds, but changes everything. The crying child's tears, which have been flowing constantly throughout the minigames, are now falling directly onto Fredbear's spring lock mechanisms. Moisture, the exact thing the spring lock safety training warns against, is dripping onto sensitive mechanical components. The child is also struggling, moving, panicking, creating vibration and impact on the suit. These conditions combine to trigger the spring lock's catastrophic failure. The jaws snap shut with mechanical force far exceeding what would be needed for a performance. The spring locks, designed to secure heavy animatronic components, engage with full pressure, and the child's skull is caught between them. The sound that would accompany this, mechanical grinding and clicking mixed with screams, is mercifully absent from the 8-bit minigame, but the visual is clear enough. Blood appears, the screen shakes, and what was meant to be a scare prank becomes something horrifyingly different. Time seems to slow in the aftermath. The minigame shows the crying child's perspective going dark, the screen fading, sounds becoming muffled. This is a child going into shock, consciousness failing as massive head trauma overwhelms his system. The frontal lobe of his brain has been severely damaged or destroyed, the same injury that the Bite of 87 victim will later suffer. But this child is younger and smaller, less able to survive such catastrophic damage. Whether he dies immediately or lingers is a matter of interpretation. The severity appears beyond question, based on what we witness, though the exact outcome remains one of the game's mysteries. The next scene is in a hospital or medical facility, rendered in the same 8-bit style but with different coloring and imagery. The crying child is presumably in a bed, connected to life support, while around him appear different characters and text. Most notably, we hear what's interpreted as Michael's voice speaking in grey text, apologizing. "Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me. I'm sorry." The apology comes too late, after the damage is done, but it shows Michael finally understanding the weight of what he's done. This isn't a prank that went slightly wrong, but a life-destroying mistake, and Michael will carry the guilt for the rest of his existence. The Fredbear plush appears in these final moments as well, speaking in its characteristic yellow text. "You are broken. I will put you back together." This cryptic promise has spawned countless theories about what it means. Some interpret it as William Afton promising to rebuild his son through technological means. Others see it as a spiritual promise of restoration, while some view it as empty comfort offered to a dying child. The game refuses to clarify, leaving these final words as one of FNAF 4's enduring mysteries. The medical equipment imagery that appears includes what looks like pills, an IV drip, and flowers, suggesting the child survives at least long enough to be hospitalized, to receive visitors, to have some period between the bite and final death. A flatline sound eventually plays, which many interpret as indicating cardiac arrest and likely clinical death, though even this has been debated within the community. Some wonder if the child actually dies, or if William somehow preserves him, or if his consciousness ends here or lingers in some form. The game leaves this deliberately ambiguous. The implications of the bite of 83 extend far beyond the crying child's fate. For Michael, this is the moment that defines his entire character arc. He killed his brother, or at least caused fatal injury, through cruelty and carelessness. The guilt from this will drive him to work at Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations as night guard under assumed names. Will send him into his father's underground facility following orders to free his sister. Will make him willing to endure being scooped and possessed by Ennard. Everything Michael does afterward can be traced back to this moment, to trying to atone for or undo what he did on his brother's birthday. For William Afton, the bite may represent a turning point in his relationship with his family and his experiments. His youngest son is dead or dying from an animatronic malfunction. His older son is responsible. His daughter is presumably already dead inside Circus Baby. William's response, if the later sister location connections are accurate, is not grief, but experimentation, using the circumstances to explore fear, nightmares, and the possibilities of preserving consciousness through mechanical means. The death of his son becomes data rather than tragedy. For Fazbear Entertainment, the bite forces immediate changes. The spring-lock suits are likely shelved right after this incident or shortly thereafter, when the full scope of the danger becomes clear. Fredbear's family diner closes, either permanently or temporarily. Safety regulations are implemented. The company faces potential lawsuits and negative publicity. Henry Emily must confront that his invention killed or nearly killed a child, which may strain his partnership with William. The foundation of the entire company cracks from this incident. For the community of Hurricane or wherever Fredbear's is located, the bite becomes local tragedy. A child dies at his own birthday party, crushed by a mechanical bear meant to entertain. Parents start questioning whether animatronic entertainment is safe for their children. The other kids present, Michael's friends, who helped carry the crying child to his fate, must live with their role in causing a death. The birthday party they attended becomes a source of trauma rather than celebration. The crying child himself, in those final moments before death or transformation or whatever happens to him, experiences the absolute fulfillment of his worst fears. Everything he was afraid of, everything the Fredbear plush warned him about, everything that made him cry and hide and beg not to go to the diner, all of it proves justified. The animatronics did hurt him. The teeth did close on him. His terror was correct, and no one protected him from what he feared. It's a particularly cruel end for a child who spent his final days crying and afraid. The timing of the bite, at a birthday party specifically, adds another layer of tragedy. Birthdays are supposed to be celebrations, times when a child is the center of positive attention. when they receive gifts and cake and are made to feel special. The crying child's birthday becomes the day he dies, the day when being the center of attention means being lifted by bullies and having his head forced into mechanical jaws. The inversion of what a birthday should be is complete. Questions remain about the exact mechanics of what happened. Was Fredbear in animatronic mode when the bite occurred? Or was someone wearing the suit? If someone was inside, did they try to stop the spring locks from engaging? Or were they powerless to prevent it? If Fredbear was in animatronic mode, was the jaw closure a programmed behavior triggered by the child's presence, or purely a spring lock failure? The game shows us the result: head in mouth, jaws closing, blood appearing, but the precise technical details that would explain exactly why the mechanism engaged remain obscure. The Bite of 83 establishes several important elements for the broader FNAF lore. It shows that spring lock failures are not theoretical dangers, but actual events that kill or maim. It demonstrates that the animatronics can cause severe harm, even unintentionally, setting precedent for later incidents. It creates a distinction between this bite and the later bite of 87, showing that Fazbear Entertainment's history includes multiple catastrophic failures. And it provides a concrete tragedy at the heart of the Afton family, a moment when whatever dysfunction existed crystallized into irreversible harm. The community's reaction to this minigame when FNAF 4 first released was intense speculation and debate. Was this the bite of 87 finally shown after being referenced since the first game? The copyright date of 1983 on the TV suggested otherwise, but many refused to believe there were two separate bites until additional evidence accumulated. The identity of the victim, the identity of who was apologizing, the meaning of "I will put you back together," all became subjects of extensive theorizing that continues years later. In the end, the Bite of 83 is about the consequences of cruelty, the failure of adults to protect children, the dangers of technology deployed without full understanding of its risks, and the moment when a family's dysfunction turns fatal. It's a brother's prank becoming manslaughter, a father's surveillance failing to prevent disaster, a child's terror proving absolutely justified, and a birthday celebration transforming into a funeral. Everything that comes after in the FNAF timeline carries the weight of this moment, this bite, this death, this family falling apart in the worst possible way. The nightmare animatronics, manifestations of fear, when darkness falls and the bedroom lights go out in Five Nights at Freddy's 4's gameplay sections. The child protagonist must face horrors that dwarf anything seen in previous games. The nightmare animatronics are not simply damaged or aggressive versions of the familiar characters, but towering monsters designed to embody pure terror, with teeth like daggers, claws like knives, and behaviors that suggest predatory intelligence. Understanding these creatures, what they are and what they represent, is central to unlocking FNAF 4's deeper meanings. Nightmare Freddy is perhaps the most unsettling of the main four, not because of his appearance alone, but because of what accompanies him. He's a massive, decayed version of Freddy Fazbear, his brown fur torn and weathered, his mouth filled with rows of sharp teeth that no real animatronic would ever possess. His eyes glow with malevolent awareness, and his fingers end in claws, rather than the rounded digits of the original character. But Nightmare Freddy's defining feature is the three smaller creatures that accompany him, the Freddles. The Freddles are miniature versions of Nightmare Freddy that spawn on the bed, creeping across the covers toward the player. They're small enough that individually they might seem less threatening, but they appear in groups, and their presence is always a warning that Nightmare Freddy himself is near. The player must shine their flashlight on the bed to scare away the Freddles before they accumulate enough to summon their larger counterpart. This mechanic creates constant pressure, forcing the player to regularly check the bed, even while managing threats from the hallways and closet. Nightmare Bonnie emerges from the left hallway, his purple form appearing as a decayed, twisted version of the guitar-playing rabbit from the original game. Like Nightmare Freddy, Bonnie's design takes the familiar and corrupts it into something nightmarish. His face is heavily damaged, showing the endoskeleton beneath ragged fabric. His teeth are elongated and sharp, filling his mouth in a way that suggests predatory function rather than aesthetic design. His eyes glow with the same malevolent awareness, and his posture is hunched, predatory, ready to lunge. Bonnie's behavior involves approaching down the left hallway, his footsteps audible to the player. The key to surviving him is listening for his breathing when you reach the door. If you hear breathing, you must close the door and wait for him to leave. If you don't hear breathing, you can shine your flashlight down the hall to send him retreating. But if you make the wrong choice, if you flash the light when he's at the door, or leave the door open when he's present, Bonnie will attack with a jump scare that ends your night. The reliance on audio cues makes him particularly nerve-wracking. Nightmare Chica haunts the right hallway, the yellow chicken transformed into a ragged horror with her trademark cupcake companion similarly corrupted. Chica's design features the same torn fabric, exposed endoskeleton, and rows of sharp teeth as the others. Her cupcake, renamed Nightmare Cupcake, has become a creature in its own right, with its own teeth and eyes, a small monster that rides along with its creator. Chica's behavior mirrors Bonnie's, but from the opposite direction, requiring the same careful listening and timing to avoid. What makes Chica particularly unnerving is the sound design associated with her. When she's in the kitchen, which is off-screen to the right, the player can hear the sound of pots and pans clattering, just like in the original FNAF game. This audio callback creates continuity, while also serving as a warning that Chica is active and may soon emerge from the kitchen to approach the right hallway. The familiar sound twisted into a warning signal demonstrates how FNAF 4 takes elements from earlier games and subverts them. Nightmare Foxy occupies the closet, and his behavior is perhaps the most complex of the main animatronics. Unlike the hallway threats that require listening and door management, Foxy requires regular visual checks. The player must periodically shine their flashlight into the closet to catch Foxy mid-transformation. He goes through several stages, not present at all, partially emerged, head visible, fully emerged. Each stage requires different actions. If caught early, flashing the light sends him back. If allowed to fully emerge, the closet door must be closed and held shut for a specific duration, while Foxy attempts to break out. Nightmare Foxy's design is particularly horrifying, with his fox head replaced by something more lupine and predatory, his jaw capable of opening impossibly wide, his teeth numerous and sharp. His body is even more tattered than the others, with his endoskeleton clearly visible through tears in the fabric. Unlike his counterpart in the first game who ran down a hallway, this Foxy inhabits a confined space, making the threat feel more immediate and inescapable. You can't lock him out. You can only manage his inevitable advancement. On the fifth night, the game introduces Nightmare Fredbear, and everything changes. This golden bear is larger than any of the previous animatronics, a towering monstrosity that combines Fredbear's friendly appearance with the nightmare aesthetic taken to an extreme. His mouth doesn't just have teeth, but features a second mouth inside the first, a smaller set of jaws within the larger, creating a horrifying nested structure. His eyes are small and white, lacking pupils, giving him a blind or alien quality. And most distinctively, his stomach features a mouth as well, teeth emerging from his torso, a detail that mirrors Circus Baby's internal mechanism that killed Elizabeth Afton. Nightmare Fredbear can appear in any of the usual locations: hallways, bed, or closet. This makes him unpredictable and forces the player to check everywhere constantly. Unlike the others who have set patrol paths, Fredbear is a wild card who can emerge from any direction, requiring total vigilance. His presence on night 5, replacing all the other animatronics, suggests he's either more powerful or more significant than the standard nightmares. The connection to the actual Fredbear who caused the bite is obvious. This is the child's fear of that specific animatronic made manifest. Night 6 and beyond introduce Nightmare, a mysterious, shadowy entity that appears to be a recolor of Nightmare Fredbear, but rendered in pure black with yellow accents. Nightmare's design makes him almost invisible in the dark environments of the game, just a shape with glowing elements. His name suggests he's the ultimate embodiment of fear, the nightmare to end all nightmares. His behavior is similar to Nightmare Fredbear, but even more aggressive, giving the player less time to react and requiring near-perfect timing to survive. The question of what these nightmare animatronics actually are has been debated extensively within the FNAF community. The evidence supports multiple interpretations without definitively confirming any single one. Are they literal robots that exist somewhere? Are they hallucinations induced by fear gas or drugs? Are they purely dreams, the imagination of a terrified mind? Or are they something else entirely, perhaps memories or spiritual manifestations? The game itself provides evidence that different theorists interpret in different ways. The case for them being actual physical constructs comes from Sister Location, where the breaker room map shows the FNAF 4 house as OBSV2 and appears to mark positions where animatronics might be stationed. Additionally, the private room contains monitors showing the FNAF 4 bedroom, suggesting William Afton was conducting some kind of experiment in that space. The implication is that the nightmares might be real robots, perhaps mounted on mechanical frameworks, used to test fear responses in children. This would align with William's character and his later experiments. The case for them being hallucinations comes from the suggestion of gas tanks visible in areas connected to the FNAF 4 location, and from book parallels like Ditophobia that describe similar fear experiments using hallucinogenic substances. If the child in the bedroom is breathing in chemicals designed to alter perception, the nightmare animatronics could be how those chemicals manifest visually, transforming ordinary objects or smaller mechanisms into towering monsters in the child's perception. The case for them being actual nightmares, just dreams, comes from the survival logbook where Michael Afton draws Nightmare Fredbear in response to a question about dreams. This suggests that at least Michael experienced these creatures as nightmares rather than as physical threats, dreams born from guilt about his brother's death and from working at Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations. The nightmares could be Michael's psyche combining his guilt over the bite with his experiences as a night guard, creating these exaggerated predatory versions of characters he encounters. The symbolism of the nightmare animatronics is rich regardless of their physical reality. They represent fear made tangible, childhood terrors given form. Their teeth, far more numerous and prominent than any real animatronic would have, represent the mouth that bit the crying child, the jaws that closed on his skull. Their decayed appearance mirrors death and decay. Their impossible size and strength represent the powerlessness a child feels when threatened. Every design choice emphasizes predation, corruption, and mortality. The behaviors of the nightmares also carry symbolic weight. They emerge from darkness, requiring light to see and fend off, representing how fear grows in absence of illumination. They approach slowly but inevitably, like death itself, requiring constant vigilance to postpone but never truly defeat. They make sounds that can be heard before they arrive, like fear building before an anticipated threat. And they kill instantly when they reach you, offering no second chances, just as the bite offered no second chance for the crying child. Nightmare Fredbear's stomach mouth deserves special attention, as it appears to directly mirror Circus Baby's mechanism, the claw that emerges from the torso to grab and pull in victims. This visual parallel seems unlikely to be coincidence. It connects the nightmares explicitly to the Afton family's tragedies, which suggests that whoever is experiencing these nightmares has knowledge about Elizabeth's death inside Baby. This detail points toward possibilities like Michael having nightmares that incorporate knowledge of his sister's fate, or William designing experiments that reference his daughter's death, or possibly even other scenarios we haven't fully considered. The parallel is there in the design, but exactly what it means remains open to interpretation. The Freddles, those small versions of Nightmare Freddy that crawl across the bed, could represent how fear multiplies and accumulates. One small fear might be manageable, but as they pile up, they summon something larger and more dangerous. Or they might represent the other children at the birthday party, the friends who helped Michael, the witnesses to the bite, all small participants in the larger tragedy that Nightmare Freddy embodies. Nightmare Bonnie and Nightmare Chica's mirror placement, one on each hallway, creates a sense of threats coming from both sides, of being surrounded, of having nowhere safe to retreat. The child in the bedroom is forced to constantly turn and check, never able to focus on just one direction, never able to feel secure even for a moment. This mirrors how the crying child in the minigames was surrounded by threats. Michael at home, animatronics at the diner, fears on all sides with no true refuge. Nightmare Foxy's closet behavior is particularly interesting because closets are classic locations for childhood fears. The monster in the closet is a universal childhood nightmare, and FNAF 4 literalizes this by putting an actual monster there. But Foxy's behavior, emerging in stages, requiring repeated checks, also mirrors how checking on fears doesn't make them go away. They keep coming back, keep advancing, require constant attention and management. The ultimate question about the nightmare animatronics is whose nightmares they are. The evidence points most strongly to Michael Afton, the older brother racked with guilt about causing his little brother's death. Michael's drawings in the survival logbook, his role as night guard at locations filled with animatronics, his eventual fate being scooped and possessed, all of this creates a psychological profile of someone who would absolutely have nightmares about monstrous predatory animatronics hunting him in confined spaces. But the connection to 1983, to the crying child's experiences, to details that Michael might not know, suggests the nightmares might incorporate or be inspired by the crying child's perspective as well. Perhaps Michael dreams of what his brother experienced, channeling the fear he caused, reliving the terror from his victim's point of view as punishment for what he did. Or perhaps the nightmares are a shared space, a blending of perspectives where guilt and terror merge into one horrifying experience. The nightmare animatronics succeed at their primary purpose, to terrify. They're some of the most disturbing designs in the entire FNAF franchise, taking familiar characters and corrupting them into predatory monsters. Their teeth, their eyes, their size, their behaviors, every element is calculated to provoke fear. And unlike the animatronics in previous games who could be viewed on cameras from a relative distance, these nightmares stalk right up to your position, breathing in your ear, looming over your bed, filling your closet. The intimacy of the threat makes it worse. Whether they're real robots in an experimental chamber, hallucinations induced by gas, or actual nightmares in someone's sleeping mind, the nightmare animatronics represent the same thing. Fear made manifest, guilt given form, and the inescapability of trauma. They show us what lives in the dark corners of the Afton family's psyche, what hunts through the minds of those who have witnessed or caused terrible things. They are nightmares in every sense, monsters that can't be killed or escaped, only survived until the light of 6 a.m. brings temporary respite. The bedroom. Reality or experiment. The bedroom where Five Nights at Freddy's 4's gameplay takes place is simultaneously one of the most intimate and most mysterious locations in the entire franchise. On the surface, it appears to be a simple child's bedroom with 2 hallway doors, a bed, a closet, and various pieces of furniture and toys. But evidence from later games, particularly Sister Location, suggests this seemingly ordinary space might actually be something far stranger. An observation chamber in an underground facility where William Afton conducted experiments on children using fear as his tool. Understanding what this room actually is becomes crucial to understanding what the gameplay of FNAF 4 represents. The bedroom's layout is deceptively simple. The player stands roughly in the center, able to turn toward 4 main points of interest: the left hallway door, the right hallway door, the closet directly ahead, and the bed behind. There's no security office setup like in previous games, no cameras to check or doors to seal. The only defensive tool is a flashlight, and even that must be used carefully, as flashing light at the wrong moment can trigger an attack. This stripped-down approach to the gameplay creates a different kind of tension than earlier entries, more immediate and personal. The bedroom's decoration suggests it belongs to a young child. There are toy figures of the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza characters visible on shelves and furniture. A Freddy plush sits on the bed itself, which is odd given the crying child's fear of the animatronics, but makes sense if this is actually Michael's room rather than his brother's. The color scheme is fairly neutral, browns and grays, without the bright primary colors you might expect in a younger child's space. The furniture is simple but functional. A small lamp on the bedside table, a clock on the wall showing the passage of time through the night. Standard bedroom elements, but certain details feel wrong when examined closely. The doors to the hallways don't lead to adjacent rooms you'd expect in a normal house, but to long corridors that seem to stretch farther than residential architecture would support. The closet is unusually deep, more like a small room than a typical bedroom closet. The bed is positioned facing away from the doors, an impractical arrangement for actually living in this space. And perhaps most tellingly, there are visible pipes and industrial elements on the walls and ceiling that don't match a residential aesthetic. The breakthrough in understanding this room came with Sister Location's release. In the breaker room on night 2, when the player is restoring power to the facility, A map appears showing not just Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, but several connected locations. One of these is labeled OBSV 2 and has a layout that exactly matches the FNAF 4 bedroom. OBSV presumably stands for observation, suggesting this room is designed for watching and studying something or someone, not for comfortable living. Even more damning is what appears when you enter the code 1983 on the keypad in Sister Location's private room. The 3 monitors, which usually show camera feeds from around Circus Baby's facility, instead display static images of the FNAF 4 bedroom from multiple angles. We see the bed, we see the hallway, we see the room from perspectives that match the FNAF 4 gameplay cameras. This proves definitively that William Afton was surveilling this space, watching whoever was inside it, and that this surveillance system is connected to his underground facility. The implications of the bedroom being an observation chamber rather than a real home are staggering. It means that the gameplay of FNAF 4, the night spent fending off nightmare animatronics, might not be happening in a child's actual bedroom during actual nights, but in a controlled environment where William is testing something. The question becomes, what is he testing, and on whom? The most prevalent theory, drawing on evidence from Sister Location and later materials, is that William Afton created an experimental setup to induce and measure terror in child subjects, possibly in his pursuit of understanding fear and how emotions affect consciousness and possession. According to this interpretation, the bedroom would be a fake environment designed to feel like a safe space while actually being fully controlled and monitored. The nightmare animatronics might be actual mechanical constructs, perhaps mounted costumes and parts on rolling frameworks as described in some later materials, programmed to emerge from hiding spots and approach the subject. However, this remains an interpretation pieced together from various clues rather than explicitly stated in the games. The hallucinogenic gas theory ties into this interpretation. Some have noticed what appear to be tanks in areas connected to the FNAF 4 location, and later book stories like Dittophobia from Tales from the Pizzaplex describe fear experiments using substances to alter perception. If we draw parallels from these book accounts to the games, it's possible William could be using some kind of fear-inducing chemical in the room, possibly through those industrial pipes visible on the walls. This would help explain why the nightmare animatronics look so distorted and monstrous. The child subject would see ordinary animatronic parts or simpler props as towering creatures, their perception warped by whatever substance they might be breathing. The Sister Location private room notably contains what appear to be gas tanks, which some interpret as supporting this idea, though their exact purpose is never explicitly stated. The book Dittophobia, from the Tales from the Pizzaplex series, provides a parallel that many in the community believe illuminates what might be happening in the FNAF 4 bedroom. In that story, a character is trapped in a facility designed to look like a home, subjected to fear experiments involving animatronics and the substances that alter perception, made to believe he's living a normal life while actually being studied. The similarities to the FNAF 4 setup are striking enough that many interpret this as Scott Cawthon's way of clarifying what the bedroom represents through book parallels, though as with all FNAF book content, the exact relationship between book events and game events remains a subject of debate. If the bedroom is an experimental chamber, the next question is, who is being experimented on? The most common answer is Michael Afton himself. After the bite of 83, after Michael's prank killed or severely injured his younger brother, William might have punished Michael by subjecting him to the same fears his brother experienced. This would explain why Michael draws Nightmare Fredbear in the survival logbook. When asked about dreams, he's not recalling actual dreams, but memories of the experiment chamber where he was forced to experience nightmarish visions. This punishment interpretation fits William's character as we understand it from later games. He's not a loving father who would comfort a son racked with guilt, but a cold experimenter who would see his son's guilt as an opportunity to gather data on fear and trauma. Putting Michael in the chamber wouldn't be about revenge or justice, but about studying how the human mind responds to controlled terror, with the added benefit of punishing Michael for the embarrassment and liability the bite caused for Fazbear Entertainment. Another possibility is that multiple children were subjected to experiments in this chamber over time, with Michael being just one of several test subjects. The map showing Obydelvin Lofferern OBSVV 2 suggests there might be an OBSVU 1 as well, potentially other observation chambers elsewhere in the facility. William could have been running these experiments on children he kidnapped, lured, or otherwise acquired, using them to refine his understanding of fear, agony, and how emotions imprint on animatronic components. The plush trap hallway adds another layer to this mystery. In the FNAF 4 minigames between nights, the player can attempt a sort of red light, green light game with plush trap, a small animatronic similar to Spring Bonnie. Successfully stopping plush trap on the X marked on the floor reduces the time of the next night by 2 hours. This hallway appears on the same breaker room map as the bedroom, suggesting it's another part of the observation facility rather than a separate location. The plush trap minigame could be part of the experimentation protocol, a test of reaction time and nerve that rewards success with reduced fear exposure time. Or it could be a reward system William built into the experiment, giving subjects a way to earn slight reprieves from the main chamber experience. Either way, its inclusion on the facility map confirms that what we're seeing in FNAF 4 isn't scattered locations, but a connected complex designed for specific purposes. The fake house environment is particularly cruel if you consider it from the subject's perspective. Imagine being a child locked in what looks like a bedroom, told you'll be safe if you just make it through the night. But actually, you're in a concrete bunker beneath the ground while mechanical horrors are wheeled toward you from hidden compartments, or your perception is chemically altered to make shadows seem like monsters. The psychological torture of that scenario exceeds even the physical danger the animatronics represent. The connection to the actual Afton house, the one seen in the minigames where the crying child lived, is worth examining. The bedroom in the minigames and the bedroom in the gameplay sections share some visual similarities but aren't identical. They could be the same room photographed and recreated in the underground facility, William building a replica of his son's bedroom to use in experiments. Or they could be actually the same room, with the Afton house built directly above or connected to the underground facility, allowing William to move between legitimate home life and secret experiments easily. The sister location maps dots that might represent animatronic positions suggest something physical in the observation chamber, not just pure hallucination. Even if gas is altering perception, there might be actual mechanical elements present that the gas makes appear more threatening. This hybrid approach, real stimulus combined with chemical enhancement of fear response, would give William the most useful data, tracking both how subjects react to actual threats and how their minds amplify those threats under chemical influence. The purpose of these experiments ties into William's broader goals as we understand them from the full timeline. He's obsessed with understanding remnant, agony, and how consciousness can be preserved or transferred. Fear is the most potent emotion for creating agony, the supernatural substance that allows haunting and possession. By subjecting children to controlled terror, William could be trying to generate and study agony in pure form, learning how to weaponize it or harness it for his later projects. The automated nature of the experiments is especially chilling. If dittophobia is indeed a parallel to the FNAF 4 situation, it confirms that William set these chambers up to run on their own, automatically dispensing food, deploying animatronics on schedules, managing the entire experiment without requiring his constant presence. This means children could be trapped in these chambers for weeks, months, or even years, their entire existence reduced to surviving night after night of managed terror, while William occasionally checks the data. The bedroom setting specifically might be chosen for psychological reasons. Bedrooms are supposed to be safe spaces, the room where you're most vulnerable during sleep, but also most protected. By turning that safe space into a death trap, William inverts the fundamental comfort that bedrooms provide, creating a space where the normal refuge from fear becomes the source of fear. This psychological warfare would produce different responses than if he simply put children in obviously dangerous industrial spaces. Whether the FNAF 4 bedroom is a real child's bedroom, a replica in an underground facility, or something in between, what's clear is that William Afton watched it through cameras, connected it to his sister location complex, and likely used it for purposes that had nothing to do with comfortable domestic life. The room is a stage for horror, a laboratory for studying fear, and a prison for whoever William decided to trap there. The nightmare animatronics aren't random dream elements, but part of a calculated system designed to break children's minds and harvest their agony for William's experiments. Michael Afton, the player's true identity. The question of who we play, as in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, has been one of the most contentious debates in FNAF lore since the game's release. For years, the community argued between two main positions. Either we play as the crying child himself experiencing nightmares before or after his death, or we play as Michael Afton, the older brother, suffering guilt-induced nightmares, or being punished with fear experiments for his role in his brother's death. The evidence has gradually accumulated in favor of the Michael interpretation, making it the most widely accepted theory within the community, though it's worth noting that, as with many FNAF mysteries, absolute confirmation from the creator has never been provided. The strongest evidence for Michael as the player comes from the Survival Logbook, a canon book released in 2017 that functions as a security logbook for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, with annotations from multiple characters. On page 41, in response to the question, "Do you have dreams?" someone has drawn a picture of Nightmare Fredbear. The drawing is crude but recognizable, showing Nightmare Fredbear's distinctive appearance with sharp teeth and aggressive posture. This confirms that whoever drew this picture has experienced the nightmare animatronics from FNAF 4 and associates them specifically with dreams. The logbook is written from the perspective of Michael Afton during his time as Mike Schmidt, the night guard from the first game. Throughout the book, Michael makes notes and doodles that reveal his experiences and state of mind. The fact that he draws Nightmare Fredbear when asked about dreams means Michael has had nightmares featuring this exact creature, strongly suggesting he is the protagonist of FNAF 4's gameplay sections, where Nightmare Fredbear appears as the primary antagonist of Night 5. This interpretation makes thematic sense for Michael's character arc. He killed or fatally injured his little brother by shoving his head into Fredbear's mouth. The guilt from this act would absolutely manifest as nightmares featuring a monstrous version of that same animatronic hunting him, trying to do to him what he caused to happen to his brother. Nightmare Fredbear becomes Michael's psychological punishment, his guilt made manifest, stalking him through darkness, just as his actions stalked his brother to death. The behaviors of the nightmare animatronics also align with Michael's experiences and knowledge. They mirror the mechanics from FNAF 1, where Michael works as Mike Schmidt, checking doors, listening for audio cues, managing limited resources, all familiar elements from his time as a night guard. The nightmare versions are amplified and more aggressive, but the core gameplay loop reflects the actual work Michael does at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. If the FNAF 4 protagonist is the crying child, why would his nightmares use mechanics from a job he never had? Sister Location provides additional context through its connections to both Michael and the FNAF 4 locations. We know Michael is the protagonist of Sister Location, working as a technician in Circus Baby's entertainment and rental at his father William's direction. The facility contains the maps showing the FNAF 4 bedroom as an observation chamber, and when you enter 1983, you see that bedroom on monitors. This places Michael in close proximity to the very location where the FNAF 4 gameplay occurs, giving him opportunity to experience whatever happened there. The theory that William subjected Michael to fear experiments as punishment for the bite integrates multiple pieces of evidence into a coherent narrative. According to this interpretation, after Michael causes his brother's death in 1983, William, rather than comforting his grieving son, uses the situation as an opportunity for experimentation. He would have placed Michael in the observation chamber, possibly with hallucinogenic gas, to enhance his fear response, subjecting him to nights of mechanical terror. This would serve William's research into fear and agony, while also punishing Michael for the liability and embarrassment the bite caused. However, it's worth noting this remains a theory pieced together from various clues rather than explicitly confirmed narrative. Michael's later actions throughout the series suggest someone driven by guilt and a need to fix or atone for past wrongs. In Sister Location, he follows his father's instructions to free Elizabeth, even though it leads to him being scooped and used as a skin suit by Ennard. In FNAF 1, he takes a job as a night guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, despite knowing the dangers, possibly trying to understand what his father has done or seeking some form of redemption. In FNAF 3, voice lines suggest he's looking for William, ready to confront the man who has caused so much suffering. All of this behavior tracks with someone who has carried deep guilt since childhood, someone who made a terrible mistake that killed his little brother and has been trying to make up for it ever since. The nightmares in FNAF 4 would be an early manifestation of this guilt, either as actual dreams Michael has for years after the bite, or as memories of the experiment chamber, where William forced him to confront his fears as punishment. The alternate interpretation, that we play as the crying child in FNAF 4, has its own evidence and logic. The minigames clearly show the crying child's perspective, and transitioning from minigame to gameplay could represent moving from waking life to nightmare sleep, or from consciousness to coma dreams. The crying child's extreme fear of the animatronics would explain why they appear so monstrous in the gameplay. This is how a terrified child sees them, as literal monsters rather than entertainment robots. The hospital imagery in the final scene, the pills, IV, and flowers that appear, suggests the crying child lingers between life and death after the bite. The nightmares could be what he experiences during his coma, his mind creating defensive scenarios where he must survive until 6 a.m., until morning, until he can wake up, except he never does. The promise to put you back together could reference his shattered consciousness, trying to reassemble itself through these repeated survival scenarios. However, the Michael interpretation has become more widely accepted as additional evidence accumulated, particularly the survival logbook drawing and the sister location connections. The community has largely settled on what many see as a compromise position. The minigames show the crying child's perspective leading up to the bite, but the gameplay sections represent Michael's guilt-driven nightmares or his experience in William's fear experiments afterward. This interpretation allows both brothers' suffering to be represented in FNAF 4, just in different ways, though as always with FNAF, other readings remain possible. This dual perspective enriches the game's narrative. We see what Michael did through the minigames, watching him and his friends torment the crying child across those final days. Then we experience the consequences through the gameplay, enduring the nightmares that guilt and punishment have created. The game shows us both the crime and the sentence, the action and the reaction, the cruelty and the horror it produces. Michael's characterization throughout the series as someone undead, purple, and decaying after sister location scooping adds another layer to the FNAF 4 nightmares. Is Michael having these nightmares while still alive before being scooped? Or do they continue after? His undead mind still trapped in loops of guilt and terror, even when his body is possessed by Anard, and later when he becomes a rotting corpse. The nightmares could be eternal. A psychological hell Michael can never escape regardless of his physical state. The specific choice of Nightmare Fredbear as the pinnacle threat in FNAF 4 makes perfect sense for Michael. This is the animatronic that killed his brother, the specific character whose jaws closed on the crying child's skull. Of course, Michael's nightmares would eventually distill down to just this creature, this representation of his worst moment, hunting him relentlessly. Night 5 being exclusively Nightmare Fredbear shows how Michael's guilt focuses on that specific animatronic above all others, the one that was used as a weapon in his fatal prank. The progression through the nights also mirrors a kind of escalating punishment or increasing trauma. Nights 1 through 4 feature the standard 4 nightmare animatronics, representing general guilt and fear. Night 5 introduces Nightmare Fredbear, the specific source of trauma. Nights 6 through 8 introduce Nightmare, a pure shadow creature that represents fear in its most abstract form, perhaps the guilt stripped of all specifics and reduced to pure existential dread. This progression suggests someone diving deeper into their psychological wounds across repeated sessions. Michael's relationship with his father William adds context to why these experiments or punishment scenarios would occur. William is not a normal father, but a murderer and experimenter who views his own children as tools or subjects. Using Michael for fear research or punishing him through nightmares fits William's character perfectly, and Michael, possibly out of fear of his father or inability to escape his control, endures these experiences, storing up resentment and guilt that will eventually motivate his later actions. The question of whether the FNAF 4 gameplay represents actual experiments Michael underwent or nightmares he naturally developed may not have a single answer. It could be both. William might have subjected Michael to the observation chamber experiments shortly after the bite, using gas and mechanical scares to punish him and gather data. Then, years later, the trauma from those experiments combines with natural guilt about his brother's death to produce recurring nightmares that follow the same pattern. The line between induced and natural fear blurs when the induced fear was severe enough to become a permanent fixture of someone's psyche. In the end, Michael Afton, as the player of FNAF 4, creates a tragic arc for the character. He starts as a bully, thoughtless and cruel, causing his brother's death through a prank. He's then punished, either by his father's experiments or by his own guilt manifesting as nightmares, forced to experience terror similar to what his brother felt. This transforms him into someone driven to atone, to fix the damage his family has caused, even at the cost of his own life and eventually his humanity. The nightmares are where Michael's journey truly begins, where the bully becomes the penitent, where the killer becomes the one who seeks redemption. The Fredbear plush, Watcher in the Shadows. Throughout the mini-games of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, one constant presence accompanies the crying child. A golden Fredbear plush that appears in virtually every scene, watching, following, and occasionally speaking words of cryptic comfort or warning. This plush toy has become one of the most debated elements in FNAF lore, with its true nature and purpose spawning multiple theories that touch on surveillance, possession, and the relationship between William Afton and his youngest son. Understanding what the Fredbear plush represents is crucial to understanding the crying child's experience and the broader mysteries of FNAF 4. The plush first appears in the opening scene of the first minigame, sitting in the crying child's bedroom with completely dark eyes before they suddenly light up with small white pupils, a visual effect associated with possession or activation in the FNAF universe. From that moment forward, the plush appears in nearly every location the crying child visits. It sits in his room, follows him through the house, appears on the route to Fredbear's family diner, shows up inside the diner itself, and even manifests in impossible locations like sitting on top of a building or in a sewer grate where no plush toy should physically be able to rest. This impossible mobility and omnipresence immediately signals that the Fredbear plush is not a normal toy. The crying child never appears to be carrying it, yet it's always there, always watching with those white pupil eyes, always positioned to observe wherever the child goes. The plush also speaks, delivering messages in yellow text that appears on screen without any indication of how the child is hearing these words. Is the plush literally talking? Is someone speaking through it? Or does the child simply perceive guidance coming from this object? The messages the plush delivers are consistent in tone, but cryptic in meaning. Tomorrow is another day. You know what will happen if he catches you. He's always watching. You are broken. I will put you back together. These phrases offer minimal comfort, while maintaining a sense of surveillance and inevitability. The plush doesn't offer practical help like, "I'll protect you," or "Tell an adult what's happening," but rather seems to observe and comment, while maintaining distance from actual intervention. The surveillance aspect becomes explicitly confirmed in Sister Location, where the private room contains a Fredbear plush, sitting on a desk, next to what appears to be a remote control or walkie-talkie device. This visual strongly suggests that the plush contains electronics allowing someone, presumably William Afton, to monitor and communicate with the crying child remotely. The plush would then function as a mobile camera and speaker system, explaining its omnipresence and its ability to deliver messages. William could be watching his son's every move, listening to his cries, tracking his location, all through a toy the child might believe is a comfort object. The idea of William using the plush to monitor his son fits his character as established in later games. He's a man who built underground observation facilities, who experimented on children, including possibly his own, who valued data and control over emotional connection. Surveilling his youngest son through a toy camera would be perfectly in line with his methods. The question becomes why he's doing this monitoring and what purpose the cryptic messages serve. One possibility is that William is studying his son's fear, watching how the crying child responds to Michael's bullying and to the animatronics he encounters. The messages would then be designed to maintain the child's fear at useful levels, neither letting it dissipate through comfort nor allowing it to escalate to the point where the child becomes completely non-functional. Tomorrow is another day. Keeps hope alive just enough that the child continues existing in the fearful state, rather than completely shutting down or telling someone who might intervene. Another possibility is that William actually cares about his son in some limited way, but expresses that care through surveillance and cryptic guidance rather than direct protection or comfort. He watches to ensure the child is physically safe, warns him away from direct dangers, but doesn't interfere with the psychological torment because that serves his research purposes. This would make the Fredbear plush William's way of being present as a father, while maintaining the emotional distance necessary to use his son as a test subject. However, the possessed theory offers a different interpretation of the plush's nature. Rather than, or in addition to being a surveillance device, the plush might be genuinely haunted by a spirit trying to help or communicate with the crying child. Some theories point to Charlotte Emily, Henry's daughter. Based on clues from various games, Charlotte appears to die around this same time period and goes on to possess the puppet. Charlotte's connection to the puppet and her apparent role as a protector of other children's spirits makes her a candidate some consider plausible for also inhabiting or communicating through the Fredbear plush, though this interpretation has its skeptics. Evidence supporting Charlotte as the plush's spirit includes the protective nature of some messages, the fact that the plush seems to genuinely care about the crying child's well-being, in a way William demonstrably doesn't based on his later actions, and the yellow text speech color being associated with entities other than William in various contexts. Additionally, some connect the final promise, "I will put you back together," to Charlotte's later actions with the puppet, where she appears to help murdered children possess animatronics. A third theory, though more speculative, suggests Elizabeth Afton, William's daughter who dies inside Circus Baby, might be the spirit in the plush. This interpretation draws on the empty girl's room in the FNAF 4 house, which some believe suggests Elizabeth might already be deceased by the time of these minigames, and on sister locations' implications that Elizabeth and the crying child know each other as siblings. Under this reading, Elizabeth could be trying to warn or protect her younger brother from beyond death, using the plush as a vessel to maintain family connection. This theory has some supporters, but remains more speculative than the William surveillance or Charlotte protection interpretations. The phrase, "I will put you back together," deserves special analysis, as it's become one of FNAF's most iconic and mysterious lines. Spoken by the Fredbear plush in the final scene after the bite, as the crying child lies in what appears to be a hospital bed. These words can mean several things depending on who's speaking them and what they intend. If William is speaking, putting back together could mean attempting to preserve his son's consciousness through technological means, perhaps creating the first experiment that will later lead to the sophisticated remnant and possession techniques he employs. It could reference plans to rebuild the child as a robot, similar to how Charlotte is rebuilt as a robot in the novel trilogy. or it could simply be an empty promise, words meant to comfort a dying child, without any real intention or ability to follow through. If Charlotte is speaking through the plush, putting back together might reference the Happiest Day minigame seen in FNAF 3, where a child at a birthday party finally receives the celebration they never got in life, allowing them to pass on peacefully. Charlotte, as the puppet, appears to orchestrate this event, quite literally putting together a peaceful moment for traumatized children's spirits. The promise to the crying child would then be that even in death, he won't be forgotten or left alone. If Elizabeth is speaking, the phrase might reference her own experience of being put back together after Ennard ejects itself from Michael's body and she reconstitutes as Scrap Baby in later games. She would be promising her brother the same continuation beyond death that she experiences, though whether that's actually a comfort or a curse is questionable. The ambiguity of who's speaking and what they mean has never been definitively resolved, and the different color yellow used for the final speech, compared to earlier plush dialogue, has fueled theories that multiple entities speak through the plush at different times, with William using it for most of the minigames, but something else taking over for the final message. The plush's visual design itself carries significance. It's a golden Fredbear specifically, not any other animatronic character. This directly connects it to the animatronic that will cause the bite, creating a dark irony where the child's constant companion resembles the thing that kills him. If the plush does contain William's camera and speaker, it means William chose to surveil his son using the form of the character that his business partner Henry designed, possibly another subtle manipulation of their partnership. The plush's eyes, which start dark and then light up with white pupils, use the visual language FNAF has established for possession. Possessed objects in the series typically have glowing eyes with white pupils, while unpossessed objects have dark or differently colored eyes. The plush's eyes lighting up in the first scene signals to players familiar with the FNAF's visual code that this object contains something, whether technological or supernatural, beyond being a simple toy. Throughout the minigames, the plush's positioning often mirrors surveillance camera placement. It's elevated, often on furniture or surfaces where it can see the room, positioned at angles that would provide good visual coverage. When it appears outside in impossible locations, like on rooftops or in sewers. These could be additional cameras William has placed to track his son's movements through the neighborhood, each one disguised as or synchronized with a Fredbear plush, so the child attributes any glimpse of surveillance to his familiar toy, rather than realizing he's being tracked by a network of devices. The flower imagery associated with the plush in one scene, where the crying child sees the plush's image projected onto flowers, suggests the plush might also create visual hallucinations or projections. If William has access to hallucinogenic technology, possibly the same fear gas used in the bedroom experiments, the plush could be releasing chemicals that make the child see its image everywhere, reinforcing the sense of being watched and creating paranoia that serves William's research purposes. The plush never physically helps the crying child despite its constant presence. When Michael locks his brother in his room, the plush watches but doesn't summon help. When the child is trapped in parts and service, the plush observes but doesn't intervene. When Michael and his friends carry the screaming child toward Fredbear's jaws, the plush is presumably present, but powerless or unwilling to stop the bite. This passivity suggests either William using it purely for observation, without intervention capability, or a spirit within the plush that can communicate but not physically act. The Fredbear plush stands as a symbol of the crying child's isolation and the perverse nature of his family situation. His only friend, as he calls his plushies in the first minigame, is either a tool his father uses to spy on him or a spirit of a dead child trying to help but unable to prevent tragedy. Either way, it's not real companionship but a simulacrum of comfort, a watching presence that maintains the appearance of care while offering no actual safety or protection. The child is alone even when accompanied, trapped in fear even when seemingly comforted. Connections to Sister Location. Sister Location's release in 2016 fundamentally changed how the community understood Five Nights at Freddy's 4, providing concrete evidence that transformed speculation into confirmation about the experimental nature of the FNAF 4 locations and the Afton family's involvement. The connections between these two games are so numerous and significant that discussing FNAF 4 lore without addressing Sister Location's revelations would leave major gaps in understanding. These connections span visual evidence, map layouts, code-activated secrets, and narrative parallels that tie the games together into a cohesive whole. The most striking connection comes from the Breaker Room map, visible during Sister Location's Night 2. When Michael Afton, working under the name Eggs Benedict, restores power to Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, a map interface appears showing the facility's layout. But the map doesn't just show the Sister Location venue itself. It also displays other connected locations, including one labeled OBSV2 that has a layout precisely matching the FNAF 4 bedroom where gameplay occurs, and another location that appears to be the plush trap hallway from the FNAF 4 minigames. The implications of this map are profound. It confirms that the FNAF 4 bedroom and plush trap hallway aren't standalone locations, but part of a larger complex that includes Circus Baby's facility. The OBSV2 label strongly suggests observation, meaning this bedroom is designed for watching and studying something, not for comfortable habitation. The dots visible on some versions of the map, which might represent animatronic positions or camera locations, further support the experimental nature of these spaces. The second major connection comes from Sister Location's private room, accessible only by completing specific tasks and navigating a maze of lore. This room, clearly William Afton's personal office or control center, contains multiple monitors, computer systems, and notably, a Fredbear plush sitting on the desk next to what appears to be a remote control or small device. This visual directly links William to the Fredbear plush from FNAF 4's minigames, suggesting he uses similar plushies for surveillance or communication purposes. Even more revealing is what happens when you input the code 1983 into the private room's keypad. The three monitors, which normally show camera feeds from around the Sister Location facility, change to display static images of the FNAF 4 bedroom from multiple angles. We see the bed where the player must check for Freddles. We see one of the hallways. We see the bedroom from the perspective of the player looking toward the bed. These aren't artist renditions or symbolic representations, but the actual FNAF 4 gameplay locations being surveilled by William's camera system. This 1983 Easter egg serves multiple purposes lore-wise. It confirms the year of the bite. It proves William was watching the bedroom through cameras, and it establishes that whoever was in that bedroom during FNAF 4's events was under constant surveillance. Whether the person in the bedroom knew they were being watched is unclear, but Williams certainly had the capacity to observe every moment of their experience with the Nightmare animatronics. The underground facility concept that Sister Location establishes contextualizes FNAF 4 in a new light. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental is explicitly shown to be a subterranean complex, accessed through a disguised home exterior and elevator shaft. If the FNAF 4 locations connect to this facility, they would also be underground, despite appearing to be a normal house bedroom. This explains some of the odd architectural elements in FNAF 4. The long hallways, the industrial pipes and structures, the closet that seems deeper than it should be, all make more sense as part of an underground complex disguised to look like a house. The elevator Michael rides at the beginning of each sister location night could be the same kind of access system used for the FNAF 4 locations. The house exterior seen in FNAF 4's title screen, which many assumed was a real suburban home, might actually be a facade covering an elevator or staircase leading to the underground chambers. This would explain how William could move between his legitimate business, Circus Baby's rentals and performance bookings, and his secret experiments, fear testing in the observation chambers, relatively seamlessly. The Funtime animatronics in sister location, particularly their internal mechanisms designed to capture children, provide context for some of FNAF 4's design elements. Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare each have a secondary mouth in their stomachs, a feature that directly mirrors Circus Baby's torso claw mechanism that killed Elizabeth Afton. This isn't coincidence, but a deliberate visual link, suggesting whoever experiences the FNAF 4 nightmares knows about Elizabeth's death inside Baby and incorporates that knowledge into their fear-generated imagery. If Michael is the FNAF 4 player, this makes perfect sense. He would know his sister died inside Circus Baby, and that trauma would merge with his guilt over his brother's death to create the stomach-mouth nightmares. If the nightmares are William's creation for fear experiments, the stomach-mouth could be William deliberately incorporating his daughter's death as an additional fear element, using family tragedy as psychological ammunition. The underground facility concept also explains the level of control and automation visible in FNAF 4. The nightmares appear to follow program patterns. They emerge from specific locations at specific times. They respond to light and doors in predictable ways. This feels less like organic nightmare dream logic and more like programmed behavior, robots, or mechanical props on preset routes. If the bedroom is in an underground facility full of animatronics and automated systems, these controlled behaviors make mechanical sense rather than requiring dream logic. Sister locations' custom night cutscenes, particularly the one showing Ennard escaping into the sewers after ejecting itself from Michael's body, create another link to FNAF 4. In one FNAF 4 minigame, the Fredbear plush appears sitting in a sewer grate, an odd location for a child's toy. But if the plush is related to the same underground sewer system that Ennard uses to escape, its appearance there makes more sense. The sewers might connect various parts of William's underground complex, allowing a movement between sections or providing drainage and utilities for the facility. The Afton family household, as depicted in sister location, shares some visual similarities with the FNAF 4 house seen in minigames. Michael's home in sister location features a similar aesthetic with the TV, lamp, and clock, though the layout isn't identical. This could mean the FNAF 4 house was the Afton home before certain events forced relocation, or that Michael recreated elements of his childhood home in his later residence, or simply that the Afton family has a consistent interior design preference. The similarities, while not definitive proof of anything specific, reinforce the connection between these games' events. The experimental aspect sister location introduces transforms how we view FNAF 4's gameplay mechanics. The flashlight isn't just a game mechanic, but potentially represents actual equipment provided to the test subject in the observation chamber. The doors that can be closed might be real doors in the facility, rather than bedroom doors. The bed with Freddles could be a real bed where actual mechanical props are deployed. Everything that seemed like dreamlike gameplay abstraction might actually be literal description of the experimental setup. The scooping room in sister location, where animatronics have their endoskeletons removed, provides potential context for William's broader experimentation. If he's trying to understand consciousness, remnant, and possession, he needs to be able to separate spirits from their physical containers and transfer them to new vessels. The scooper serves this purpose for animatronics, and the fear experiments in the FNAF 4 bedroom might be researching the conditions under which consciousness becomes separated from or attached to physical forms, agony being the key substance that allows these transfers. Michael's journey through sister location, following his father's instructions to reach Circus Baby's private room to free Elizabeth, involves navigating multiple nights of danger in the underground facility. This mirrors the structure of FNAF 4's nights. 5 main nights plus additional challenges. If Michael experienced the FNAF 4 bedroom experiments earlier in his life, his willingness to follow William's instructions despite obvious danger might stem from conditioning. He's learned through those earlier experiments to obey his father, even when terrified. The fake ending of sister location shows Michael in what appears to be a normal living room, watching TV and eating popcorn, suggesting ordinary domestic life continuing after his shifts. But we later learn this is false, that Michael has been scooped and is being worn as a suit by Ennard. The discrepancy between what seems normal and what's actually horrifying parallels FNAF 4's bedroom, which looks like a normal child's room, but is actually an observation chamber in an underground facility. Sister location teaches us not to trust surface appearances in FNAF locations, to look for the experimental horror beneath the veneer of normalcy. The overall narrative that emerges from connecting FNAF 4 and sister location is one of a family completely consumed by William Afton's experiments. His daughter Elizabeth dies in Circus Baby, an animatronic William designed with lethal mechanisms. His youngest son dies in a springlock failure at Fredbear's, technology William helped develop. His oldest son Michael is subjected to fear experiments in an underground observation chamber research William conducts. And throughout all of this, William watches through cameras, takes notes, treats his family's suffering as data for his work on consciousness, possession, and remnant. Sister Location's revelations answer some FNAF 4 mysteries while raising new questions. We now know the bedroom is an observation chamber in William's facility, that he watched it through cameras, that it connects to the broader underground complex, but we still don't know definitively who was in the chamber when they were there, whether the nightmares were gas-induced hallucinations or actual mechanical threats, what William learned from these experiments, or how they connect to his later actions in the timeline. Sister Location opened doors, but left many of the rooms beyond still dark. The locked box and enduring mysteries. At the end of 5 nights at Freddy's 4's Nightmare difficulty, after enduring the most punishing challenges the game can throw at a player, a final image appears. A locked box sitting in darkness with text above it reading, "Perhaps some things are best left forgotten for now." This box, simple in appearance but profound in implication, has become one of FNAF's most iconic mysteries, representing both a promise of revelation and the acknowledgement that some secrets may never fully emerge into light. Understanding the box's significance requires examining both its in-game presentation and Scott Cawthon's comments about it over the years. The box itself appears to be made of dark wood or metal, featuring two prominent locks that prevent its opening. When clicked on in the game, the locks rattle but don't release, confirming that whatever's inside remains sealed. The box sits against a plain dark background with no context clues about where it might physically exist in the FNAF universe, whether it's in someone's possession, hidden in a location, or exists only metaphorically. The text, "Perhaps some things are best left forgotten for now," is key to understanding the box's purpose. The word "perhaps" suggests uncertainty, that maybe what's inside should stay hidden, or maybe it should be revealed. Best left forgotten implies the contents are troubling, painful, or dangerous in some way, that knowledge of them would cause more harm than good, and for now promises eventual revelation, suggesting the box is sealed temporarily rather than permanently, that there will come a time when what's inside can or should be known. In the game's files, an unused sprite exists, showing the box opened but empty, its lid raised, and nothing visible inside. This sprite was never implemented in any publicly accessible way, but its existence confirms Scott Cawthon at one point intended or considered showing the box's contents. The fact that the sprite shows an empty box has spawned theories that the answer itself is nothing, that the box was meant to teach players a lesson about seeking closure where none exists. But this seems unlikely given Scott's later comments. Shortly after FNAF 4's release, when the community failed to solve all the game's mysteries despite intensive effort, Scott made a public statement acknowledging that the box was meant to be opened based on players figuring out FNAF 4's lore, but that he couldn't open it because the community hadn't reached the necessary understanding. This confirmed the box was tied to specific lore revelations, that solving FNAF 4 correctly was meant to unlock its content somehow, either through figuring out what was inside or earning the revelation through comprehensive understanding. Years later, in an interview with YouTuber Darko, Scott addressed the box again with more candid explanation. He confirmed that there was something specific he had in mind for the box, but acknowledged that the idea remained in the ether and expressed uncertainty about whether he could recapture or reconstruct what he originally intended. This suggests the box's contents were tied to how Scott understood the lore when FNAF 4 released. But as the series expanded and the story evolved through subsequent games and books, whatever the box originally contained may have become incompatible with or less relevant to the new direction the series took. This statement disappointed many fans hoping for eventual concrete answers, but it also reflects the reality of how FNAF's lore has developed. Scott has acknowledged in various contexts that the story has evolved beyond what he originally planned, with later games adding elements he hadn't envisioned when making FNAF 4. If the box's contents were tied to the original vision for the story, and that vision has changed, then opening the box might reveal something that's no longer accurate to the series as it now exists. Theories about what the box contains have proliferated across the years. One popular interpretation is that it contains the crying child's body or remains, supporting the "I will put you back together" promise, by literally holding the pieces of the deceased child. This would make the box a coffin or reliquary, its locked state representing the family's unwillingness or inability to face what happened to the child, and the best left forgotten text, acknowledging that opening the box would mean confronting his death directly. Another theory suggests the box contains the crying child's identity or name, the one piece of information that would conclusively answer whether he becomes Golden Freddy, whether he's separate from Cassidy, whether he's ever revived or recreated by William. Under this interpretation, the box being locked represents Scott's decision not to confirm the crying child's ultimate fate, keeping it ambiguous so players can interpret the lore according to their preferred theories without being definitively proven wrong. A third interpretation views the box as metaphorical rather than literal, representing the entire FNAF 4 story or the full truth about the Afton family. Opening the box would mean understanding everything about the bite, the experiments, the nightmares, the family's dysfunction, and the consequences that ripple through the timeline. The box staying locked means these secrets remain partially hidden, that we see enough to piece together likely scenarios but never get complete confirmation of every detail. The franchise box theory suggests the box represents the original FNAF story from the games 1 through 4. The complete narrative arc Scott planned before deciding to continue the series. In this reading, the box in FNAF 4 was meant to symbolize the end of the story, everything tied up and locked away as finished. But when Scott continued making games, the box remained locked because the story remained open, the original ending replaced by ongoing narrative. FNAF 6, Pizzeria Simulator, attempted to close this box again with its fire ending, but even that didn't stick as the series continued further. The visual of the box appears again in FNAF World, where a sprite shows it open, and in various forms throughout the franchise. Each appearance seems to tease the possibility of revelation while maintaining the sealed state. This recurring imagery reinforces the box as a symbol of FNAF's nature as a mystery, a series that thrives on hidden secrets and unanswered questions, where the search for meaning is often more important than definitive answers. Some have speculated that Scott's statement about not being able to find what was in the box might be literal rather than metaphorical, that there was a specific file, image, or document he created showing the box's contents, but that he's since lost it due to time, changed computers, or disorganization. If true, this would make the box's contents literally irretrievable, a piece of FNAF history that existed briefly, but vanished before being shared. The box's presentation at the end of the hardest difficulty is significant. You have to earn the right to even see the box, beating both the regular game and the nightmare challenges, demonstrating mastery of FNAF 4's mechanics and commitment to uncovering its secrets. But even after this achievement, the box remains locked, suggesting some mysteries persist regardless of skill or dedication, that understanding FNAF isn't just about beating challenges, but about accepting uncertainty. The phrase "for now" has kept hope alive across years that the box might still someday open. Each new FNAF game release brings renewed speculation that this will be the one that reveals the box's contents. Books get analyzed for clues. Movie details get scrutinized for references. Every new piece of FNAF media becomes an opportunity for Scott to finally fulfill the implicit promise of revelation. But as time passes and the box stays locked, "for now" starts to feel more like possibly never. The philosophical implications of an unsolvable mystery in a series built on mysteries are worth considering. FNAF's appeal has always been partially about the thrill of investigation, of piecing together hidden lore from minigames, phone calls, and environmental details. The locked box represents the ultimate form of this, a mystery that can be theorized about endlessly, but never definitively solved. This frustrates completionists but energizes theorists, creating endless discussion and keeping the community engaged. Some argue the box should never be opened, that doing so would diminish FNAF by removing one of its central mysteries, The ambiguity allows for diverse interpretations, for different players to believe different things about the story without being proven wrong. Opening the box would establish canon at the expense of possibility, trading mystery for certainty. Whether that trade would improve or worsen the series is debatable. The box also represents Scott Cawthon's relationship with his fanbase, which has been characterized by cryptic hints, deliberate misdirection, and occasional straight answers followed by new layers of mystery. The locked box is Scott explicitly saying he won't or can't give players what they want, that some things must remain unknown either by design or by circumstance. This transparency about withholding information is almost more frustrating than if he'd said nothing at all. Within the context of FNAF 4's narrative specifically, the box could represent the crying child's perspective, the one thing we never fully access despite playing through minigames that show his experiences. We see him from outside, watch him be tormented and killed, but we never get inside his head completely, never truly understand what he's thinking or feeling, except through implied fear. His inner world remains locked, his ultimate fate uncertain, just like the box. The possibility remains that Scott will eventually address the box definitively, either opening it with concrete contents or closing the question entirely by confirming it will never be opened. Until that happens, the box exists in a state of potential revelation. A promise half made that keeps players returning to FNAF 4, analyzing its details, searching for the understanding that might finally turn that key and lift that lid. The locked box serves multiple purposes in FNAF's broader narrative. It's a symbol of lost opportunities, of questions left unanswered, of the gap between creator intent and community understanding. It's a reminder that FNAF is fundamentally about mysteries, and that solving one often reveals 3 more lurking behind it. It's an acknowledgement that some stories don't have clean endings, that some secrets die with their keepers, that some truth remains forever just out of reach, no matter how hard we grasp for it. For new players discovering FNAF 4 years after its release, the box represents a historical artifact, a piece of the franchise's mythology that's inseparable from the community experience of trying to solve the game when it was new. The frustration and excitement of those early theory days, when the box felt like it might open any moment if the right piece fell into place, has been preserved in the image of those 2 rattling locks. Whatever the box contains or contained or might have contained, its true content now is the mystery itself. The questions about what secrets hide in FNAF's deepest corners. The uncertainty that defines so much of the series' appeal. In staying locked, the box has become more significant than if it had opened, a symbol that transcends any specific revelation to represent the entire experience of engaging with FNAF's deliberately obscured narrative. FNAF 4's place in the timeline and legacy, Five Nights at Freddy's 4, occupies a unique position in the franchise's timeline, serving as both a prequel to the entire series and a key to understanding events that span decades. Released in 2015 as the supposed final chapter, FNAF 4 simultaneously revealed the earliest tragedy in the timeline, the bite of 83, while also potentially showing events from much later through the bedroom experiments and Michael's nightmares. This temporal complexity, where the minigames occur in 1983, but the gameplay might take place later, makes FNAF 4 essential to understanding how the franchise's narrative connects across time. The 1983 setting of the minigames places them before everything else players had seen in the series. The original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza from FNAF 1 operates in the early 1990s. FNAF 2's location runs in 1987. FNAF 3's Fazbear's Fright opens in 2023. But FNAF 4 took us back to 1983, to Fredbear's family diner, showing us the foundation of the Fazbear empire before the murders, before the possessions, before the franchise became synonymous with tragedy. This made FNAF 4 the chronological starting point for understanding how everything went wrong. The Bite of 83 establishes several elements that will echo through the timeline. It shows that springlock technology is dangerous, foreshadowing William Afton's eventual fate in a Spring Bonnie suit. It demonstrates that animatronics can cause severe head injuries, setting precedent for the Bite of 87. It reveals the Afton family's dysfunction, explaining why William becomes increasingly willing to harm children if he views even his own son primarily as research material. And it creates Michael Afton's guilt, the driving force behind his actions throughout multiple games. The introduction of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie in FNAF 4 explains elements from earlier games that previously seemed random. Golden Freddy's appearances in FNAF 1 and 2 gain context as being related to Fredbear, the original golden animatronic. The Spring Bonnie suit that William uses in FNAF 3's minigames to lure children is revealed to have existed since the beginning. The partnership between two founders that Phone Guy mentions in earlier games is shown in action, with Henry and William's collaboration still functional in 1983, before their eventual falling out. The confirmation of two separate Bite incidents, the Bite of 83 and the Bite of 87, resolved one of the franchise's longest-running debates. Players had speculated since FNAF 1 about what the Bite of 87 was and which animatronic caused it, but FNAF 4 revealed that the Bite we witness in its minigames is a different incident entirely, 4 years earlier, with different circumstances. This meant the Bite of 87 remained unsolved even after FNAF 4 showed us a Bite, adding complexity rather than simplifying the timeline. The bedroom experiments, if they occur later than the minigames, connect FNAF 4 to sister location and show William Afton's ongoing research into fear and agony. This creates a through line from the crying child's death in 1983 to William's sophisticated understanding of remnant and possession by the time of FNAF 6. The experiments represent William learning how to weaponize fear, discovering what agony does to consciousness, and developing the techniques he'll use to trap souls in animatronics and preserve his own existence. FNAF 4's impact on the community when it released was immense and controversial. Marketed as the final chapter, it was expected to answer long-standing questions and tie up loose ends. Instead, it introduced new mysteries, contradicted some prevailing theories, and left major questions unanswered, particularly with the locked box. The frustration this caused mixed with appreciation for the game's atmosphere and scares, creating a divisive reception that has mellowed into recognition of FNAF 4 as a crucial, if deliberately obtuse, piece of the lore. The game's shift from security office to bedroom gameplay influenced the direction of later FNAF games. The audio-focused mechanics where listening for breathing and footsteps becomes critical showed that FNAF didn't need to rely on cameras and electricity management. This experimentation with core mechanics would continue in sister locations' varied night designs, and in the later games' more exploratory approaches. FNAF 4 proved the series could adapt while maintaining tension. The Nightmare animatronics designs set a new standard for horror in the franchise. Previous games featured animatronics that were creepy, but still recognizably entertainment robots. The Nightmares, with their excessive teeth, sharp claws and decayed appearance, were pure horror monsters. This aesthetic influenced later designs, with characters like Nightmare Balloon Boy and the twisted animatronics from the novel trilogy, continuing the trend of making familiar characters into explicit monsters. The revelation that William Afton has a family, that he's not just a faceless killer, but a father with children who suffer the consequences of his actions, added depth to his character while making him more disturbing. A murderer is frightening, but a murderer who treats his own children as experimental subjects is horrifying on a deeper level. This family dynamic became central to later games, with Michael's journey and Elizabeth's fate driving significant portions of Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator's narratives. The crying child's identity and fate remain among FNAF's most debated topics, even years after FNAF 4's release. Whether he becomes Golden Freddy, whether he's reconstructed as a robot, whether he's the same as or different from Cassidy, whether he simply dies and moves on, all remain subjects of active theory crafting. The game provides enough evidence for multiple interpretations without confirming any single one, which keeps discussion alive but frustrates those seeking definitive answers. FNAF 4's influence on how the community approaches FNAF lore solving was significant. The game was so obtuse, with so many layers of symbolism and hidden meaning, that it trained theorists to look deeper into everything, to assume nothing was coincidental, to build elaborate frameworks to explain small details. This heightened scrutiny benefited later game analysis, but also led to overthinking and to theories that read too much into random elements. The community sometimes seeing complex lore where none existed. The game's position as supposedly the final chapter meant it attempted to tie into all previous games simultaneously. References to FNAF 1, 2, and 3 appear throughout, from the phone guy call Easter egg to the animatronic behaviors mirroring earlier games, to the minigames showing the origin of characters that haunt later locations. This created a web of connections that either enriched the narrative or made it impenetrably complex depending on your perspective. Sister Location's revelations about FNAF 4, approximately a year after its release, demonstrated how later games could recontextualize earlier entries. What seemed like a straightforward nightmare game became evidence of underground experiments. What looked like a child's bedroom became an observation chamber. This set a precedent where future FNAF releases might fundamentally change how we understand previous games, making definitive timeline placement difficult until the full picture emerges. The game's legacy includes popularizing certain phrases and concepts that have become part of FNAF's vocabulary. "I will put you back together," rivals, was that the bite of 87 for iconic status. Nightmare Fredbear is instantly recognizable, even to casual fans. The locked box symbolizes unanswered mysteries across the franchise. The crying child, despite or because of his namelessness, has become a central figure in FNAF's mythology. FNAF 4's aesthetic influence extended beyond the games into fan works, with the Nightmare animatronics becoming popular subjects for fan art, animations, and theory videos. The game's creepier tone and more horror-focused approach attracted creators who wanted to explore FNAF's darker possibilities, while its mysteries gave theorists endless material to work with. The combination made FNAF 4 a cultural touchstone within the community. The game's role in establishing the Afton family saga cannot be overstated. Before FNAF 4, William Afton was the purple guy, a mysterious killer. After FNAF 4, he became the father of Michael, Elizabeth, and the crying child, a man whose family was destroyed by his own actions and obsessions. This humanization through family connections made the broader narrative more tragic, while also making William more detestable for harming children, including his own. subsequent entries in the franchise have both clarified and complicated FNAF 4's lore. The survival logbook confirmed Michael as the player. Sister Location revealed the observation chambers. Pizza Simulator's Midnight Motorist minigame might show the Afton family home again. The Fazbear Frights books provide parallel stories about fear experiments and agony. Each edition helps, but also adds new questions about how exactly FNAF 4's events connect to the timeline. The game's technical achievement in pure horror should be acknowledged. The sound design, which requires players to use headphones to distinguish breathing from ambience and to track animatronic positions, creates immersion and tension. The lighting effects, with the flashlight beam cutting through darkness to reveal threats, generate jump scares that feel earned rather than cheap. The overall atmosphere of being small and vulnerable in a confined space with monsters hunting you succeeded at the basic task of being frightening. FNAF 4's legacy is as the game that showed the beginning while hinting at the middle and end, that gave answers while spawning more questions, that tried to conclude the series while actually setting up its future direction. It's simultaneously one of the most important and most frustrating games in the franchise, essential to understanding the lore while being deliberately opaque about key details. This duality defines its place in FNAF's history. The game taught the community that FNAF's story would always be complex, always require effort to understand, always leave some elements mysterious. The days of relatively straightforward narratives, if they ever existed, were definitely over after FNAF 4. This set expectations for later games, with players accepting that they would need to piece together details from multiple sources and accept some ambiguity in the final picture. FNAF 4's connection to themes of guilt, family trauma, and childhood fear gives it emotional resonance beyond just jump scares and lore revelations. It's a game about a child who died afraid, about a brother who carries that death as guilt, about a father who watched and did nothing, about how family dysfunction can destroy everyone involved. These themes elevate FNAF 4 from puzzle box to tragedy. Looking at FNAF 4 years after its release, from the perspective of a franchise that has grown far beyond what it was in 2015, the game stands as a pivotal point where the series committed to deep lore, complex timelines, and interconnected narratives spanning decades. It set the tone for everything that followed, establishing that FNAF would be a series where understanding the full story required dedication, community effort, and acceptance of mystery. The game remains essential to understanding FNAF as a whole. You cannot grasp Michael Afton's arc without knowing about his brother's death. You cannot understand William Afton's experiments without seeing their origins in his family's tragedy. You cannot appreciate the timeline's complexity without recognizing how events in 1983 echo through to 2023 and beyond. FNAF 4 is the keystone that, when understood, helps the entire structure make sense. Whether experienced as the frightening horror game it is on the surface, or as the dense lore delivery system it becomes on deeper examination, Five Nights at Freddy's 4 has earned its place as one of the franchise's most significant entries. It simultaneously shows us where everything started and how those beginnings led to decades of haunting consequences, how one family's dysfunction rippled outward to doom an entire company, how a simple birthday party became the source of nightmares that would never end. As we close this exploration of FNAF 4's lore, the mysteries that remain unsolved stand as testament to the game's enduring impact. The locked box still sits sealed, the crying child's ultimate fate uncertain, the full extent of William's experiments a matter of interpretation. But what we can piece together from the evidence paints a picture. a frightened child, a cruel prank, a family broken by tragedy, and nightmares that may reflect the guilt and horror of those terrible days in 1983. If you enjoyed this deep exploration into Five Nights at Freddy's 4, please consider liking and subscribing. Let me know in the comments which aspect of FNAF 4's lore you find most fascinating, which theory you believe, or what questions you still have about this pivotal chapter in the franchise's history. Until next time, sleep well, and remember what you saw.